The most dangerous voice in the ancient world belonged to someone nobody else could hear. It might tell a shepherd where to travel, it might warn a king not to fight, it might demand a sacrifice, identify a murderer, announce a disease, or explain why the dead had suddenly become very interested in household management. Today, a person who hears a voice in an empty room may describe it as an auditory hallucination. A doctor may ask about sleep, grief, medication, seizures, trauma, substance use, hearing loss, mood, and psychosis. An ancient listener had a different list of suspects: a god, a ghost, an ancestor, a demon, a prophetic gift, a dream that had escaped into daylight, or, in some surprisingly sophisticated cases, a disturbance produced by the body itself. But there was no single, ancient explanation. A Babylonian exorcist, an Egyptian dream interpreter, a Hebrew prophet, a Greek physician, and a Roman skeptic could hear the same report and disagree before lunch. Even within one city, the verdict depended on who heard the voice, when it spoke, what it demanded, and whether the local professionals approved of its tone. If a respected prophet heard a god, that could become policy. If an unpopular neighbor heard the same god, that could become a problem. The voice was invisible. The consequences were not. Before entering the temples, there is one uncomfortable fact. We do not know how the earliest humans explained hearing voices. Speech is ancient. Human brains capable of vivid inner experience are ancient. Hallucination-like experiences probably did not wait politely for writing to be invented. Fever, sleep deprivation, isolation, bereavement, epilepsy, trauma, intoxicating plants, and mental disorders all existed long before medical textbooks. But Stone Age people did not leave case reports. A cave painting may show a ritual specialist, mythic being, or costume. It cannot tell us whether its painter heard a voice. Modern hunter-gatherer cultures cannot simply be used as living fossils. They have their own histories. Studying them reveals human variety, not subtitles for a mind that lived 30,000 years ago. So the honest story begins where voices entered writing, and there the boundary between mind and world looked very different from ours. Modern people often imagine thoughts as private events sealed inside the skull. Ancient cultures did not always divide experience so neatly. Gods sent dreams. The dead remained socially active. Spirits entered bodies. Curses caused pain. Omens appeared in stars, animal organs, births, smoke, and unfortunate household accidents. The invisible world was not a decorative belief placed on top of reality. It was part of reality. Thunder could express divine anger, and a dream could carry a warning. Then a voice without a visible mouth did not require the category sound generated by my own brain. It required identification. Who is speaking? Why now? And can the message be trusted? In ancient Mesopotamia, gods were believed to communicate through a vast system of signs. Specialists examined celestial events, unusual births, dreams, patterns in oil, and the organs of sacrificed animals. A sheep's liver could become a message board, although the sheep was rarely invited to interpret it. This system mattered because divine communication was not automatically clear. The universe contained information, but information required trained readers. Prophetic speech also appeared. Texts from places such as Mari, from the early 2nd millennium BCE, record messages delivered by men and women who claimed a deity had spoken through them or entrusted them with a message. Some spoke while in unusual states. Some addressed the king. Their reports concerned temples, warfare, loyalty, offerings, and royal behavior. But the palace did not necessarily obey every dramatic person entering with news from heaven. Messages could be checked against other divinatory procedures. The messenger's identity mattered. Previous accuracy mattered. Political usefulness mattered because human institutions remain human even when gods are copied onto clay tablets. This is the first major difference from the modern stereotype. Ancient people were not automatically credulous. They believed divine speech was possible, yet worried constantly about false prophecy, misinterpretation, manipulation, and hostile. Supernatural forces. Belief did not eliminate skepticism, it changed what skepticism examined. Instead of asking only, did the brain generate this voice? They might ask, which being sent it, and is that being reliable? Mesopotamian medicine shows the same overlap. Illness could be associated with gods, demons, ghosts, broken taboos, witchcraft, or bodily processes. Healers used prayers, incantations, rituals, plant remedies, bandages, and practical observations. The exorcist and physician could be part of the same response. A person behaving strangely, speaking abnormally, suffering seizures, or reporting invisible attackers might be understood through several causes at once. A ghost could trouble the patient because funeral duties had been neglected. A deity could punish an offense. A demon could attack. The body could also show recognizable patterns that called for recognizable treatments. Ancient explanation was often additive. The spirit caused the illness, illness affected the body, the ritual addressed the spirit, and the remedy addressed the symptoms. Nobody was required to choose between metaphysics and soup. Egypt offers another caution. Popular accounts love to announce that ancient Egyptians documented schizophrenia in a medical papyrus. The evidence is far less tidy. Egyptian medical texts discuss bodily and mental disturbances, but translating them into modern psychiatric diagnoses is risky. A phrase written thousands of years ago does not arrive with a diagnostic interview. What Egyptian sources clearly reveal is a world in which dreams, gods, the dead, and oracles could communicate. People wrote letters to deceased relatives asking for help, accusing them of causing trouble, or requesting that they intervene. The dead were not merely remembered, they could remain participants in family disputes. Dreams could be classified and interpreted. Temples offered environments where divine guidance might be sought. In later periods, oracle questions could be answered through the movement of a divine image carried by priests, or through other formal procedures. This did something important. It moved revelation from a private claim into a public ritual. A voice heard alone is difficult to verify. An oracle surrounded by priests, rules, sacred space, and tradition becomes socially organized evidence. The institution did not prove that a god had spoken. It decided what counted as speaking. Ancient Israelite texts make the drama even more direct. In one famous story, the young Samuel hears his name at night and assumes the priest Eli is calling. He goes to Eli 3 times. Only then does Eli recognize the call as divine and instruct Samuel how to answer. The story contains a surprisingly modern problem. The voice is heard. The source is misidentified. An experienced person helps interpret it. The text does not treat every voice as divine merely because it is disembodied. Prophets could be true or false. Dreams could deceive. Spirits could mislead. Messages were judged by religious law, communal authority, fulfillment, moral content, and competing claims. When multiple prophets announced opposite outcomes, a God told me did not end the argument. It started the meeting. Prophetic experience also cannot be reduced to what modern psychiatry calls an auditory verbal hallucination. Ancient writings use literary convention. Text saying, "The word of the Lord came," may describe an audible voice, an inner conviction, a dream, a vision, ritual speech, or a theological way of presenting authority. We cannot place the author in a scanner, and this limitation matters throughout ancient history. Stories about God speaking are not transparent medical records. Epic poetry, sacred narrative, political propaganda, autobiography, and later biography all shape experience into meaningful forms. When Achilles hears a goddess in a poem, that does not prove Greek soldiers regularly hallucinated divine women during arguments. It proves the poem lives in a world where divine intervention makes sense. Still, Greek sources show how broad that sense could be. The Greeks associated certain altered states with divine influence. Prophecy could belong to Apollo. Ecstatic or frenzied experience could be linked to Dionysus. Poetic inspiration belonged to the Muses. Plato described forms of divine madness that could be superior to ordinary sanity when granted by the gods. This sounds like madness receiving an excellent public relations team. But the distinction was serious. Not every loss of ordinary control was considered disease. Some unusual states could reveal truth, heal, inspire art, or connect a person to divine power. At Delphi, the Pythia delivered Apollo's oracle. Popular imagination pictures her inhaling mysterious fumes and shouting incomprehensible syllables while priests performed emergency editing. The historical reality is debated. Ancient descriptions vary, and geological theories about intoxicating gases remain contested. What matters here is that the oracle's authority did not depend simply on a woman saying she heard a voice. Place mattered, ritual mattered, timing mattered. Apollo's sanctuary consultation process, the attendance, and generations of reputation transformed speech into an event that cities and rulers took seriously. Then there was Socrates. According to Plato, Socrates experienced a daimonion, a divine sign associated with a voice, that had come to him since childhood. It did not normally tell him what to do. It stopped him from certain actions. Socrates referred to the sign while defending himself at the trial that ended with his execution. His accusers charged him with impiety and introducing new divine things. Apparently, A private supernatural warning system was not the easiest feature to explain to a suspicious jury. Modern writers have diagnosed Socrates with epilepsy, hallucinations, or various psychiatric conditions. None can be established. We possess literary portraits written by others, not clinical observations. Plato and Xenophon do not even present the sign identically. To label Socrates retrospectively may reveal more about modern categories than about his nervous system. The ancient question was not whether he met a diagnostic checklist. It was whether his sign was genuinely divine, religiously acceptable, philosophically meaningful, or evidence that he was introducing something dangerous. Yet Greek thought also produced a powerful alternative. Perhaps abnormal experience arose from nature, not supernatural invasion. The Hippocratic treatise on the sacred disease attacked the claim that epilepsy was more divine than other illnesses. Its author argued that the disease had a natural cause and involved the brain. He accused ritual healers of using divine explanations to hide their ignorance. That is a remarkably sharp criticism from roughly 24 centuries ago. But it was not modern neurology arriving early with a stethoscope and excellent funding. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. Hippocratic medicine relied on theories about bodily fluids, air, phlegm, bile, and balance that do not match current science. The important change was the direction of explanation. Strange behavior, seizures, fear, and disturbed perception could be products of bodily dysfunction. A person might appear to be attacked by a god while actually suffering a disease with material causes. Supernatural and natural explanations now competed more visibly. Sometimes they coexisted inside the same person. A Greek or Roman intellectual could criticize superstition, consult a physician, report a meaningful dream, and sacrifice after an omen. Humans rarely keep explanatory systems in separate folders. Roman society inherited Greek medicine and philosophy while maintaining elaborate practices of divination. Augurs interpreted birds. Officials consulted sacred texts. Dreams, prodigies, and oracles influenced decisions. Household religion filled daily life with divine and ancestral presences. Elite writers could also mock gullibility. Cicero's work on divination presents arguments both for and against its reliability. Lucian later made a career from treating religious frauds with the tenderness of a man reviewing a suspicious online course. The ancient world therefore contained believers, doubters, professionals, opportunists, patients, and performers. It also contained technology. Temples could use hidden spaces, pipes, acoustics, moving statues, concealed attendants, or stagecraft to produce divine effects. Not every reported wonder was a hallucination. Some voices may have been ordinary human voices placed where the audience could not see the speaker. A statue that speaks is impressive. A priest behind the wall is architecture. But fraud does not explain every private experience either. Humans genuinely hear voices without external speakers. Modern studies find hallucination-like experiences among people with psychotic disorders, but also among some people without a psychiatric diagnosis. Voices can occur around sleep. A person falling asleep or waking may hear a name, a sentence, music, or a sudden sound with astonishing clarity. Bereaved people sometimes sense or hear someone who died. Extreme stress, trauma, fever, neurological conditions, sensory loss, drugs, and prolonged wakefulness can produce unusual perceptions. Hearing a voice is an experience. Its cause is a separate question. Ancient people lacked neuroscience, but they were surrounded by the same vulnerable human machinery. Imagine a grieving woman waking before dawn and hearing her dead mother speak. Modern interpretation might consider a bereavement-related sensory experience, something reported by many otherwise healthy people. Her culture might interpret the moment as an actual visitation. The sound could be equally vivid in both descriptions. What changes is the map. Culture supplies names, expectations, characters, and acceptable responses. A Christian in late antiquity might hear an angel or demon. A Greek might understand a divine sign. A Mesopotamian might fear a ghost. Another person in the same society might blame fever, fraud, or exhaustion. The brain does not produce experience in a cultural vacuum. Even the language of a voice can reflect the hearer's world. Voices often use familiar concepts: They may take the identity of a respected authority, a feared enemy, a relative, a deity, or an ancestor. Their emotional tone can be comforting, commanding, insulting, or threatening. This is why the social position of the hearer mattered so much. An authorized prophet had a recognized role: training, lineage, temple affiliation, ritual setting, and community acceptance could protect unusual experience by giving it meaning. An unauthorized hearer had fewer protections. If the voice supported existing institutions, it might be revelation. If it challenged the king, priesthood, or law, it might be false prophecy, possession, rebellion, or madness. This was not pure cynicism. Communities needed methods to distinguish insight from danger. A command to make an offering is different from a command to kill a neighbor. A warning that later comes true gains status. A stream of incoherent threats accompanied by inability to eat, sleep, or function creates a different problem from a controlled ritual message. Ancient observers judged patterns, not merely the presence of a voice. They watched behavior. They examined dreams. They checked omens. They consulted specialists. They asked whether the message fit tradition. In other words, they performed differential diagnosis with more incense. Ritual could also shape the experience before it happened. Fasting, chanting, repetitive music, darkness, isolation, sleep disruption, intense expectation, psychoactive substances, pain, and emotional arousal can alter perception. Not every ancient ritual used these methods, and not every altered state produced voices. But sacred practices could create conditions in which unusual experiences became more likely, then provide a script for interpreting them. If someone enters a temple expecting Apollo, undergoes purification, sleeps in a sacred place, and wakes from a vivid dream, the experience does not arrive as anonymous neural activity. It arrives already dressed. Dreams were especially important because the ancient boundary between dream and revelation was porous. A sleeping person could meet the dead, receive medical instructions, see a god, or hear a warning. Dream books offered interpretations. Healing sanctuaries associated with Asclepius encouraged incubation, in which visitors slept at the sanctuary seeking a divine dream and cure. Some awoke believing a god had operated on them, prescribed a remedy, or removed disease. Expectation, rest, ritual care, natural recovery, practical treatment, and religious meaning could all contribute. The patient did not need to decide whether the cure was psychological or divine. That particular argument had not yet ruined dinner. What happened when voices were frightening? Treatment followed the explanation. If a ghost was responsible, the family might repair burial rites or make offerings. If a demon attacked, ritual specialists used prayers, amulets, fumigation, incantations, purification, or exorcistic practices. If a god was angry, the patient might confess, sacrifice, restore a neglected obligation, or consult an oracle. If the body was blamed, healers might prescribe diet, rest, bathing, bloodletting, herbs, or other remedies. Some helped, some did nothing. Some created an exciting second medical problem. Responses ranged from compassionate care to restraint, exclusion, punishment, or exploitation. The idea that all ancient mentally ill people were immediately chained or killed is false. Families often cared for distressed relatives. Temples could provide structure and hope. Communities could accommodate eccentric behavior. But supernatural interpretations could also become dangerous. A person identified as possessed, cursed, polluted, or deceptive could be isolated or abused. A voice commanding socially forbidden acts could bring punishment regardless of its cause, meaning offered protection and risk. Then, in the 20th century, a psychologist named Julian Jaynes proposed one of the boldest explanations of all. He argued that people in early civilizations experienced commands generated by one part of the brain as the external voices of gods. According to his bicameral mind hypothesis, introspective consciousness as we know it developed relatively late, around the end of the second millennium BCE, as social upheaval made the older system fail. The idea is irresistible. Ancient gods were hallucinated commands. Civilization began with humanity taking instructions from its own brain and not recognizing the number. Jaynes drew on ancient texts, especially the Iliad, in which gods frequently direct human action. He saw the changing style of literature as evidence for a changing mind. But the hypothesis is not accepted as established history or neuroscience. Literary characters are not transparent samples of population psychology. The absence of modern introspective vocabulary does not prove the absence of introspection. Ancient texts contain planning, deception, self-control, memory, emotion, reflection. Language and genre change without the human brain undergoing a sudden redesign. Most importantly, no evidence shows that entire ancient societies routinely hallucinated commands or lacked consciousness in the modern sense. James raised fascinating questions about language, authority, and inner speech. He did not discover that Bronze Age humans were unconscious voice assistants. The theory survives because it points toward a real mystery. When any human experiences an internally generated voice as coming from someone else, how does the brain decide who owns a thought? Modern research offers several models. The brain constantly predicts and interprets sensory input. Inner speech normally carries a sense of self-generation. If the processes marking an experience as mine become disrupted, inner verbal material may be experienced as alien. Memory, attention, expectation, emotion, and perception can interact. No single model explains every voice, but one lesson fits the ancient evidence beautifully. Expectation influences interpretation. A brain trained to anticipate divine messages is more likely to identify an unusual voice in religious terms. That does not prove the experience is fake. It shows that perception and meaning are partners. Ancient people did not simply hear random sounds and invent religion afterward. Their religion shaped what a voice could be before it spoke, and their communities shaped what happened next. The decisive question was rarely, is there an acoustic wave in the room? It was, does this voice belong in our world? A god's command fit. A dead relative's complaint fit. A demon's insult fit. A fevered patient's confusion could fit a bodily model. A rival prophet's convenient revelation fit the category of fraud. Several explanations could remain available until ritual, recovery, politics, or failure selected one. This makes ancient interpretation less primitive than it first appears. They lacked knowledge of neurons, neurotransmitters, seizures, psychosis, and sleep-related hallucinations. They often attributed suffering to invisible agents that modern medicine does not recognize. Yet they understood that voices required context, distinguished welcomed messages from tormenting ones. They knew that not every claimant was truthful. They knew altered states could be cultivated. They knew illness could disturb perception. They knew one person's revelation could become everybody else's political emergency. The greatest difference was not that ancient people heard voices while modern people do not, it was where each society placed the speaker. Modern medicine often locates the event inside the nervous system. Ancient religion often located it within a relationship between the human and an invisible being. One asks about mechanisms, the other asks about intentions. Those questions can lead to radically different lives. If the voice is a symptom, the hearer becomes a patient. If it is a god, the hearer may become a prophet. If it is a ghost, the family may owe a funeral. If it is a demon, the community may call an exorcist. If it contradicts the authorities, the hearer may become a criminal. The sound can remain the same. Society changes the biography. So imagine the ancient listener again. It is night. The fire has weakened. Everyone nearby appears asleep. A voice says the listener's name with the unmistakable tone of someone who expects an answer. There is no visible speaker. The listener does not ask whether auditory association cortex activated without an external stimulus. The listener searches the available world. Was it a dream, a dead parent, God, a hostile spirit, the first sign of fever? Tomorrow, an elder, priest, diviner, physician, relative, or ruler may decide. They will judge the message, the setting, the hearer, and whatever happens afterward. If the warning comes true, it may become sacred history. If it fails, it may become false prophecy. If the hearer recovers after a ritual, the spirit was defeated. If herbs work, the body was restored. If nothing works, another explanation waits nearby. Ancient humans did not solve the mystery of hearing voices. Neither have we completely. They placed the mystery among gods, ghosts, bodies, dreams, and social authority. We place it among brain networks, prediction, memory, trauma, sleep, culture, and disease. Their mistake was often assuming that a vivid voice required an invisible speaker. Our mistake can be assuming that one modern label explains every vivid voice. The human brain creates speech, recognizes speech, imagines speech, remembers speech, dreams speech, and sometimes presents speech without attaching the correct return address. For an ancient person, that missing address opened the universe. Anything could be listening, and worse, anything could answer.